Hello everybody, welcome to the podcast Business and Technology in Tennessee. I'm Josh Davis, the Marketing Director at InfoSystems, and with me today is a special guest, Molly Blankenship, somewhat new to Chattanooga, works for the Chattanooga Area Chamber of Commerce as Vice President of Talent Initiatives. And I'm sure people might need a little bit of an explanation as to what that is, but first, I want to talk just a little bit about your transition into Chattanooga and some of your background professionally, and just so people can kind of get to know you a little bit. This podcast is focused on business leaders in our region, not really IT professionals, more business leaders. So I think it's important for business leaders in our community to know the people who are at the Chamber of Commerce out there working every day on building our community and building, the local economy. So since you're so new to Chattanooga, I thought it would be kind of interesting to ask you about a few, Chattanooga legacy destinations and find out if you've been there or not.
Okay. And
so maybe you could just answer, been there, plan to go there, or no way I'd go there.
Okay. You're going to get me in trouble. Okay, I'm ready.
It'll be fun. So first would be Rock City, Ruby Falls.
Plan to go there.
Obviously a huge tourist destination. For hundreds of miles around Chattanooga, you see signs for Rock City, Ruby Falls. So
yes, my whole childhood, I saw signs for Rock City.
You have to go.
Never fully understood what it meant, and still have not seen it. But my child, I have a 4.5-year-old, and she's been to both, but I still am lagging behind. So,
okay, you got to catch
me out. I know, it's a problem.
All right, Hamilton Place Mall.
Hamilton Place Mall. Have I been there? I don't know if I've been there. I think I've been to a mall. Is Hamilton Place the one in East Brainerd?
It's East Brainerd.
And then there's one in Hickson too, right?
Yeah.
Hamilton Place Mall. Been there.
Been there. Nice.
Have not been to Hickson.
See, you live in the downtown-ish area.
Yes.
And, those of us who either live or work outside of downtown.
Yeah.
We know that the downtown dwellers don't really like to leave downtown. So that's why I threw that one in there.
It's a thing. We're going to break the divide. You're right. Yeah.
Okay, so Hunter Museum.
Been there.
Been there.
Been there. Loved it.
Of course. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it was awesome. And we can talk more about this too. But whenever people ask me what helped me make the decision to move to Chattanooga, part of it was seeing the Hunter perched up on that cliff over the river.
It's such an awesome view. I mean, from the Hunter down to the river is a great view.
Yeah.
But looking up at the museum is such a cool view too.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Okay, how about Uncle Larry's Restaurant?
Is that hot fish?
Yeah.
Plan to go there.
There you go.
We drive by it all the time, and I know that Uncle Larry's is a place for me, but I have not gotten there yet.
You got to go.
Do you recommend?
It's highly recommended.
Okay.
It's a Chattanooga staple.
What about Mimo's chopped weenies?
I have never eaten Mimo's chopped wieners.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, it's worth going. And I think Mimo's owns several of those buildings down on MLK.
Oh, really?
And so is somewhat responsible for some of the redevelopment that's going on there, or at least keeping people walking down MLK.
That's good to know. Yeah, there's some great buildings down there. Okay.
Okay, so on the restaurant, staying in that channel, what about Bee's Restaurant?
Plan to go there.
Bee's is yet another Chattanooga staple that you have to experience it.
Meat and three, right?
Yeah, the food is served on a lazy Susan in the middle of like a communal table.
Huh.
And so, you'll be seated with kind of like hibachi grill type seating. You may get seated with other guests or families, and they just load food into the middle on this lazy Susan, and you just keep dishing it out.
Cool. I'll have to try that. That sounds awesome.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Okay, a couple of outdoor destinations. Signal Point.
plan to go there. I did hike on Signal Mountain, but I'm still trying to get to where I can do something like over 1.5 miles.
Yeah.
And I think if I remember the Signal Point Trail, it would take a couple hours. I couldn't fully commit.
Signal Point, you can actually drive and park and just walk right down.
Oh,
to
really?
it. Yeah.
Oh.
But it's the trailhead for the Cumberland Trail, which
Okay.
is, I don't know, a couple 100 miles long maybe.
Okay. Something I'm still trying to figure out and is where all the trails are, how do they connect?
Yeah.
Figuring that
Don't
out
get
is
lost.
ongoing. Yeah, I did hike on Signal Mountain and get lost.
Oh.
And my husband and I, when we first moved here, went hiking on Signal Mountain. I can't remember, I want to say it was like Rainbow Lake or...
Yeah, Rainbow Lake.
Yeah, so we did that trail and we tried to follow the markers and somehow got off the trail. And even way off the trail, like we knew we were lost, we were still seeing trail markers
Yeah.
that seemed to go in a circle. So I don't know if it was an old trail or if
Yeah.
someone's out there trying to trick like lame, newcomers like me. But it was like the middle of the day on a Saturday afternoon and we thought we were done for.
There's a whole series of different trails right there that are all kind of interconnected, but the Rainbow Lake Trail, you like go downhill for what seems like forever.
Yes.
And you keep thinking you're almost there, and then it just keeps going and going and going, and finally you get down there. It's fantastic. You can go swimming. There's the waterfall that comes over the edge, and beautiful and picturesque. But then you have to hike all the way back up.
Yeah, the uphill all the way. Yeah, we came off that trail like dirty and bruised and leaves in our hair. We totally got off the trail.
I thought my dog was going to have a stroke one time when I took him down that, because he loves to swim, and we got all the way down there and did the swimming, and then but the hike back up, it was like 95 degrees, and I thought my dog was going to die. Okay, last two.
Okay.
Riverbend Festival, sort of infamous in Chattanooga.
I didn't know it was infamous.
Well, there's a subset of Chattanoogans who love it and a subset of Chattanoogans who hate Riverbend Festival.
I can imagine who loves it. Why do they hate it? Because it's a big party, or?
It's your, crotchety people who can't stand the fact that there are delays and crowds that come into downtown and ruin their, perfect life down there.
Those are the important moments for a city. We got to deal with the headaches of them.
Oh yeah.
I do not plan to go to Riverbend. I probably would go. I am not a music festival person. That's what I've learned about myself. After 1 year at Bonnaroo, I quickly learned that this is not what I do.
Bonnaroo is on a whole different level than Riverbend. The one thing I can say about Riverbend is it is the best people watching in Chattanooga. Like, you'll see things at Riverbend that you're not sure you ever wanted to see and you might never recover from.
Okay, well, now I do plan to go. I can change my answer.
Okay, last one, Chattacon.
Is that like the Comic-Con?
Yeah.
I saw those people. I missed it this year. I'm going to say plan to go. I'm going to do it. That sounds like it could be some good people watching too.
That's absolutely good people. Okay,
so awesome.
Let's talk a little about some professional stuff related to your work at the Chamber of Commerce and at previous stops.
Okay.
So before I checked out your LinkedIn profile, obviously, just to know a little about your background. And before coming to Chattanooga, you were in Washington, D.C.
I was, yeah.
At the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives.
Yeah.
And your role said Community Advancement Manager. Mm-hmm. Again, one of those things, okay, like what are you doing to advance communities? Explain a little bit about what that role was, and maybe then we can transition that into how did that experience allow you to transition into what you're doing now for the Chattanooga Chamber?
Sure. So ACCE, the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives, is an international association of chambers. So predominantly interfaces with American chambers, but also with folks in other countries around the world, and provides support to professionals who work for chambers of commerce, whether they're at the C-suite level in a chamber, or marketing, membership professionals, or folks who are really focused on community advancement. And so that was my focus, is I want to help chambers of commerce who are focused in on community development, community issues, social issues, sort of, their connected to their economic development work, and then the other issues that sort of touch on that and influence and impact economic development and community prosperity. So my primary focus was in education and talent development, and also diversity, equity, and inclusion. So my job was basically to be a consultant in a supportive role to chambers all across the country and world as they did that work, and either equip them with best practices or incorporate, give them professional development opportunities to help them learn how to do that better, learn from their peers across the country, and then bring that back to their hometowns where they could really, implement those and move the needle. So to sort of think about how that helped me transition into this role, it gave me, equipped me with this really awesome knowledge and sort of library of best practices and an understanding of how this work has played out in communities across the country, and what works and what doesn't, and what factors have to be considered whenever you're looking at moving a community, forward. And so that I knew for some time that my next step had to be, and I wanted it to be, doing this work on the ground, boots on the ground, and then found the opportunity in Chattanooga, and it happened. So
I would assume that the title Talent Initiatives means that you're spending most of your time working on what the industry calls workforce development.
Yeah. So a lot of people think that I'm in HR. I'm not in HR. The way that I talk about my job in its simplest terms is that my job is all about education, workforce development, talent attraction, and retention. So it's about the people in Chattanooga, and making sure that they have the skills and the access and the opportunity to participate in our community and our economy. And so it's interesting, the terminology is interesting because for a long time people have used the term workforce development, people still use it, but workforce development also has some interesting connotations to it. People see, sort of like old visions of like an unemployment office sometime when they hear workforce development, and you say education, and that has sort of connotations to it that's somehow separate from the workforce. And so we talk about it as talent because it's all about nurturing and developing and attracting talent to come and live and participate, grow in Chattanooga.
Which I would say, if you're going to grade Chattanooga, and this is being graded on a curve compared to other communities in our region and maybe even the greater Southeast, Chattanooga has to be doing a pretty darn good job with talent development.
I think that Chattanooga's ahead in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean that we don't have gaps that we need to fill. Every community does. You ask employers in Chattanooga what their top concern is, what's keeping them awake at night, it's talent. You ask them in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, you ask them in Sacramento, California, it's talent. It's like it's the number one topic right now, I think, across the country. So it's an issue everywhere, and so everyone has those gaps to fill.
In terms of historically low unemployment at the moment too, which doesn't help.
Absolutely, and that's a beautiful thing. It's a great economic indicator, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't cause heartache for employers, right? And so, but in terms of collaboration around talent development, in terms of innovation that's happening in our school district right now, we're ahead in a lot of ways, but we also have some catching up to do in other areas, and that's a lot of what my charge has been about. We need someone who's waking up every day thinking about this for Chattanooga, and so here I am.
And so also somewhat new to Chattanooga, Christy Gillenwater, who is the chamber CEO, she hired you.
She did.
You were on board after she came in as CEO, and so I would assume that sort of tells the story that talent is big on her radar as well. How are the two of you really working together to begin addressing these gaps, as you described, that really need to be touched on?
Yeah, so I think when Christy came in, she was in many ways playing in my role because there was such a need, and it was such a top conversation point among employers. So she knew immediately that she needed someone who was fully focused on this. We used to have someone who, my role focused on education and public policy, but both of those, public policy and talent, they're full-time jobs. So she split those and said, we need this person who wakes up every day, and it couldn't be her, and so she knew immediately that it would be a top priority and brought me in. Since I've come in, obviously she and I work really closely. and she's an awesome leader who really gets this work and understands that economic development is not just about business recruitment and business expansion, that workforce and transportation and health and human services, that it's really, economic development has changed and you have to take a holistic approach, and she's really sensitive to that.
Yeah.
So that's awesome to have on our side. And what we've really done since I came in is looked at what the Chamber has done in the past, analyzed what's working and what's not, where do we need to shift. We've looked at the Chattanooga 2.0 movement, which we're a key partner in, looked at that work and how we can continue to accelerate 2.0 and make sure those goals are met for our community. And we're about to release in April our full strategic plan that includes economic development strategies and talent development strategies.
That's part of the 2040 initiative.
Yeah, so we in February, released the vision for Velocity 2040, the 20-year community-wide vision. Had over 4,000 respondents contribute to that vision from across the community. And then the Chamber has really pulled out pieces of that and said, here's what we can do over the next 5 years to get us to 2040, to get us to that vision. And and we know that we own those economic development pieces, we own those talent development pieces in many ways. At least we can be the convener and the connector and the driver in that space. So we've said, okay, next 5 years, here's how we're going to get going.
Yeah. So let me quote an interesting, this is from your LinkedIn bio, and you may have written this, I don't know, many years ago.
It's probably not very good.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, some of the way you describe yourself professionally. It says you're passionate about systems change, determined to remove barriers standing in the way of community progress, strategic in approach, excited by disruption. My work is about service to people and service to community. So with that description, how are you infusing those things into the job you're doing today in Chattanooga?
Yeah. So I never thought someone would read my LinkedIn bio on a podcast.
That was written for a prospective employer, right? You're trying to position.
I don't know what it was written for, just to have something. LinkedIn gives me terrible anxiety. But so what I would say is, I'll just sort of take it bit by bit. So systems change. Whenever I was working for ACCE and working with chambers, sort of our mantra was move from transactional thinking to transformational thinking, move from programmatic thinking to systems change, right?
Yeah.
And systemic thinking. And so
Sure.
Programs have their place, and programs are critically important to moving the needle on some of this work. And we have awesome programs in our community. Future Ready Institutes, the CSTOMP work-based learning program, some of the work that the Chamber has done in the past. But my focus for talent development, and something that I think has not been done before, is how do we disrupt the status quo, the way that things typically operate, and how do we get out ahead of the challenges that we know are coming tomorrow? And that work is not going to, because basically the way it operates is you realize that you've got a problem. We've got a talent gap. We're not where we are. We've got people who are struggling in our community, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then we start sort of playing catch up and triaging people.
Yeah.
When really, if we could at the beginning, or at this moment in time, focus in on where are the key levers, where are the key structural gaps in our systems that create these problems in the first place, how do we address them so that we don't end up in the same conversation 15 years later?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of where the systems change and the disruption pieces come in for me, is we're going to have to do programs, and that's so super important. We have to play a role right now, but if we don't constantly ask ourselves how are we addressing this challenge for the future and thinking about systemic change, then it's all for naught. And I say this a lot, is my goal ultimately is to work myself out of a job, and I think that any person working in community advancement should.
Yeah.
These problems should be solved, and philosophically I should not have to exist. Our systems and our institutions, they should do their, we should be lifting people up so that they're ready for the economy anyways, right? And so how can I help us get to that point? That's sort of the utopian view of how a community and workforce development system should work, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what I mean.
We all know that utopia doesn't really exist anywhere, but
right.
That's what we're all striving for.
Yeah.
In marketing, as a marketing professional, I can relate to a lot of what you said, because my view of marketing, I feel like I'm probably very different in my approach to marketing than what a lot of other people do, because my approach is more about I would rather build the brand of InfoSystems by doing positive things like educating people, informing people, entertaining people, inspiring people, things like that, rather than promoting and selling products.
Right.
And I think most marketing directors, when you think of a marketing campaign, they're focused on promoting whatever their latest product or service is, and that's a short-term fix, that kind of maps directly to what you're talking about, the traditional programs in a community, that it's sort of a reaction to a problem. A company says, hey, we've got this new product, this is our Q2 initiative, what campaign can we push out there to maximize sales in second quarter? And I'm just like, oh, that's horrible marketing. People should want to come do business with InfoSystems because of our culture and because of the fantastic resources we put out there to educate and inform the business leaders about what's going on in technology and what solutions they can implement to better their company. And so I'm with you. I take more of that long-term vision, sort of a microcosm, an individual business rather than an entire community.
Yeah.
But I think, to me, if you can get people to buy in to the more large picture, long-term vision of, hey, we need to do the right things because it's the right thing to do, and because the effects of that, the more people get on board, the effects of that are going to reverberate way on down the road, versus one program that might have an impact on this small group of people who take part in that program, and it helps for the next 12 months or whatever that may be. So
and the hard thing in that is those sort of, and you're always going to need both, right? And because that utopia doesn't exist, you're always going to need both. And the hard part about systems work and thinking with that long-term vision is that sort of quick success that you get sometimes from reacting to a problem, implementing something that feels like you've remedied that to some extent, can feel really good. And people kind of, that feels good. And whether you're a participant, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a funder, that is just like, that is a good check the box, we succeeded. And so asking people to think more long-term and challenge to sort of stretch that way is definitely a tough thing.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to get into today in our discussion was Chattanooga has sort of, if you could identify one area that's really come on the map more recently as far as workforce development and economic development, it's kind of the tech-focused companies. You've got organizations like accelerator programs and venture capital and things like that have happened in Chattanooga, and some very successful companies who have reinvested in the community by putting additional money and creating more programs for more companies and good ideas to get off the ground. And a lot of that has sort of been focused on, maybe it spans multiple industries, but it has to do with technology. And you can sort of trace it back to EPB and the gig, which really got our whole community thinking about, okay, how do we really drive and become this tech-forward region? Because there's more opportunity there. I mean, if you compare technology jobs to manufacturing jobs and things like that, it's obvious where the growth potential is. So what is your perspective on where Chattanooga is as kind of a tech-forward city, or this as a tech-forward region?
So my perspective is that, and you mentioned EPB and the gig, we have awesome assets. Awesome infrastructure that equips us to be out in front of other cities our size, and with similar industry makeups and demographic makeups that, we're just uniquely positioned, I think. And I think that we're off to a really great start in the tech scene. We have work to do. And so I think that's important to remember. But between EPB, the proximity of the Oak Ridge National Lab, the work that's happening in our community around tech and innovation and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, it's huge. And you see, companies like Freightwaves and Bellhops and their recent venture raisings, and just there's a lot of momentum that we can capitalize on. And I think right now, if we're really intentional about, we can really take to the next level. And thinking about how we help more companies scale and have access to that sort of venture capital, and then share back and learn within our community. So I think we're at an exciting time, and one of the things I mentioned that the Chamber is going to be releasing that 5-year strategic plan. One of the core pillars of that, we're calling it Gig City Wins, and it's about accelerating entrepreneurship and innovation, because we've got a great start, but we need to see greater R&D and patent activity. We need more resources for entrepreneurs. We need to have more focused campaigns to bring entrepreneurs in and bring them into Chattanooga, because there is so much research showing about the impact that technology and innovation has on economic development at large. And so it's not just good for the entrepreneur scene, it's not just good for the tech scene, it's not just good for headlines. I mean, it fundamentally contributes to the prosperity of our community. So like I said, I think we're off to the races. I think we're at a great start, and if we can be really intentional right now, we can make sure that we continue to sort of scale that and get to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously one of the challenges there, we talked about when you think about education and access to opportunities for portions of the region or the city of Chattanooga that you would describe as challenged. We have to do a better job, obviously, of making sure that access to opportunities is available to everybody. And I think a big part of that is sort of the inspirational message. You really have to hit home in those communities and connect with people and inspire them to want to take those steps. It's our job, it's all the leadership's, community leaders' job to make sure that the pathway is there, but you still can't force people to take those opportunities. You have to hope to inspire them to take it. But just on LinkedIn yesterday, I think I saw a half dozen or so high-level IT positions advertised in the city of Chattanooga for employers here in Chattanooga. And I'm thinking, who are those 6 jobs most likely going to go to? And you can guess, I mean, you can stereotype and guess what type of person is probably going to get those jobs. And to me, that's a little disheartening, because you want to think that those jobs, it could be a variety of people that could look or have any type of background who could end up in that position. That's just not where we're at, and we really have to keep working. So how are you specifically, or the Chamber overall, how are you all engaged in bringing access to the more challenged communities or areas of Chattanooga?
Yeah, so it's a great point, great question, and something that I think is central to this work. So a couple things come to mind, and you're right. I totally agree that we as community leaders, business leaders, folks who are in positions of influence in this community have a responsibility and the option and an opportunity to help ensure that pathways are available, and that folks have the resources that they need to access them. Part of that strategic planning process that we've been in has, a lot of that has just been about deep community research. And for instance, one of the statistics that really pops out in my head is that 8% of households in Hamilton County do not have a vehicle, do not have access to a vehicle.
Right.
And you think about that, like 8%, it's not a huge number, but that's almost 1 in 10, right? If you really think about it.
Right.
And that's households who literally do not have access to a vehicle, not the households who have 1 and 2 adults who are working and a child who may be trying to get to school or trying to work a summer job or whatever it may be. So you start to see sort of, the barriers that can exist, and that's just one of them. I think over the coming weeks, and months, you'll see some announcements about employers who are starting to think about this differently. for a lot of employers, the traditional entryways into their places of employment do not exist anymore because of the way that automation and sort of lean operation has taken hold in the workplace. And that's really great for a business's bottom line in many ways, is to have that sort of efficiency coming in. But we also have to be intentional about how are we going to continue to open up talent pipelines so that people can make it in and then access economic mobility. And so there are employers in this community who are starting to say, you know what, we're going to think differently about this and start to open up those on-ramps. So that's exciting. And then for us, whenever we think about what our role in talent development is, there's a couple things. One, we have to make sure that there's equitable access to those opportunities. And really what we're seeing, back to your questions about technology and sort of high-level IT roles, software and IT is becoming a backbone for everything that we do in talent. And that's for a couple reasons, because so many jobs today require some level of that skill set, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in freight and logistics, whether you're IT administrative, whatever it is. And also because we know that change and disruption is coming to the workforce, we know that we have to prepare people to change and retrain and learn new technology and be the folks who implement and maintain that technology. So not only is it an imperative right now, but it's going to be a growing imperative. So we're thinking about that in terms of talent development. How do we make STEM a backbone in terms of everything we're doing? And then the final thing I'll mention, Josh, and I know I'm almost about to get like the hook or whatever to take me off stage.
No, you're doing great.
We have a partnership with Chattanooga State around apprenticeships.
Yeah.
We rolled out our first registered apprenticeship last fall. We're in the process of expanding youth apprenticeships in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, which would include pathways in healthcare, IT, non-traditional, like not what you typically think about when you think about apprenticeships, so that students who don't typically have access or the opportunity to see a variety of career options can get into a workplace and start to explore them through work-based learning. And then finally, we are rolling out a pilot program for folks who can enroll in a paid training program, a short-term 6-week paid training program, so they can leave whatever situation they're in, whether it's a minimum wage job or 2 minimum wage jobs, and they can enter into a better pathway that leads them to a higher demand, higher quality, higher paying field. And so we're rolling out that program this spring, and so they'll get paid $12.50 an hour, they'll train for 6 weeks, they'll get placed in employment, and it creates a bridge and makes sure that not only is the pathway in front of them, but they have the resources to actually get on it and see it through.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know that there are fantastic people in Chattanooga right now working on these projects or problems every day. You being one of them, and representatives at the chamber, at the city, and the county, and lots of other nonprofit organizations and things like that. So, on the one hand, while it's troublesome to think about the problems that we have, it's also great to know that we have very high quality people who are working to address those problems. You mentioned the Hamilton County Department of Education, which is obviously under new leadership. And I've had a previous podcast guest who was just talking about how fantastic his vision is for our local school system, and talking about, he was really passionate, saying how much we need to get behind what they're working on as a community, and that, long term, if we can see this through, that it's really going to have major lasting change on our community. And so you just hear of things like that from the people who are working on them or working with the people who are working on them, and it's, you feel pretty good about, okay, our community is really cares, and we're really working on major issues. I think about my past and some of the ways that I got to where I am now in my career, and a lot of it was self-education. There's so many resources available online now. I didn't go to school to learn web design, and I didn't go to school to learn creative writing, and I didn't go to school to learn even things like podcasting and how do you do a pod. I learned all of that online by doing research, reading, watching videos, watching the people who were doing the things that I thought that's really cool. That's something that I need to incorporate it. It's really easy to default into the mindset that there are so many resources out there that, the fault is on the people who are not taking advantage of the opportunities they do have. But then I began thinking about the fact that, okay, well, I had a full-time job, a computer at home, I had EPB internet at home to watch YouTube videos on and educate myself. I was already so far ahead in access to where I could put myself in better positions. Yes, I did take full advantage of the opportunities that I have, and it has worked out very well for me. But it was pretty easy for me to get to those opportunities where other people, there are people who don't have a computer in their household, and people who don't have internet access at home, and the only time they get to touch a computer might be at school during library hour or something like that. So there's a lot of work to be done, but thankfully there's a lot being done to work on those issues.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, and I think it's an important point. And whoever your last podcast guest was who said we should get behind Dr. Johnson, I'll jump on that bandwagon and say that we absolutely have to. His leadership and his vision, we are so fortunate to have it, and as much as we can support and align to that vision, will only contribute to its staying power and its impact on our community. And I think that leadership is so important, and you don't always realize that. It's like how important are individual people in this equation who are like at the helm working on it, but it is critical. And I think Chattanooga and Hamilton County, we're at this really special moment, whether it's our public leadership at our community college, our university, our chamber, and the school district, just having those leaders in place who understand the challenges, work together so well, and are really digging their heels in on it. That is super special. And so if we can capitalize on this moment, then we may get to something much closer to that utopia that we talked about earlier, and that'd be awesome.
Yeah, let's hope. So that we've gone on for a pretty good amount of time. This has been a fantastic discussion. I don't want to force people to listen to hours and hours of I could keep going. It's just so easy to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
But for those business leaders out there who may want to learn more about what is happening in Chattanooga for talent development, workforce development, economic development, you're obviously a resource that they could reach out to at the chamber to learn about. So, my guest today, Molly Blankenship, VP of Talent Initiatives at the Chattanooga Area Chamber of Commerce, obviously very passionate about what she's doing on a day-to-day basis to impact our community, and a great resource for your company to reach out to, or you as an individual leader in our community to reach out to find how do you join in on those things that we've just talked about. How do you get behind Dr. Johnson at Hamilton County Department of Education? How do you get behind Christy Gillenwater and what's going on at the Chamber of Commerce? How do you get behind Mayor Burke and what's going on at the City of Chattanooga? And there are so many other community leaders and business leaders involved. There are too many to mention, but every person in the community has an opportunity to engage and to be part of the solution rather than to just ignore the problems and act like it's not there or focus on themselves. So I'm a huge proponent of giving back. I volunteer a lot of time for various nonprofits and causes and things like that. Obviously, my paycheck comes from InfoSystems, so this podcast is a result of me trying to do my very best to get the word out about InfoSystems, while also shedding light on things that are happening in our community that I think business leaders should hear about. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing it, Josh. And anyone who's listening, please do reach out to me, whether it's getting involved with the chamber or the work that other partner organizations are doing in the community. Josh is right. We need everyone, and it's important work. So yeah, please do reach out. I'm happy to help. I'm glad
Thank
to be
you very
here.
much, Molly Blankenship. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Business and Technology in Tennessee. And until next time, thank you very much.
Thanks.